Packers, Vikings, looked like it was going to be a laugher. Packers roar back, but the Vikings and their one-score game dominance continues. I actually have a theory. So they win 27-25. KOC just like makes these close just to pump his stat padding. He just wants to pad his one-score game stats by making these blowout wins, ultimately one-score games, so he can continue to be the best in NFL history in those situations.
Renner, did you take a nap? Were you thinking, I'm just going to take a nap before the podcast starts? It's 27-10 with 10 minutes left in this game. It's over. You took a nap, didn't you?
I was debating it. Actually, my girl was laying here on the bed. I had to wake her up for the pod. She was watching it, and then it's over. I'm like, okay, this is over. I start like making food. She goes to bed. I'm like, hey, the game's over. They almost won, but I got to do the podcast now.
You know what's crazy is I had to check my DVR because I was wondering if I was watching the first Vikings-Packers game because it literally felt the exact same way where we saw Minnesota just jump out to this huge lead. And really, I mean, look, man, you watch more Packers football than anyone, but that's kind of been the Packers' MO this season against these good teams. They fell behind against the Lions, fell behind twice against the Vikings. Didn't really fall behind against the Eagles, but that game is in Brazil, and we don't count things in Brazil. But really, it's just if you're going to fall behind against these good teams, you're burying yourself in a hole that's almost impossible to get out of. And you could see that Jordan Love was frustrated with what Brian Flores was doing on defense. And then you had Sam Darnold out there just torching the Packers. And I think that was probably the biggest surprise because every week I feel like I have this inner debate with myself. Like, should the Vikings give Sam Darnold a huge contract or should they let him walk in free agency and put all their marbles in the JJ McCarthy basket? And you see a game like this and you're thinking, how could they let Sam Darnold walk? Because this team might be the number one seed if they could beat the Lions next week. So, I mean, the Vikings look great. Sam Darnold looks great and the Packers look okay.
Yeah, the Packers are in a weird situation where they have 5 losses. They are all 5 to the teams that are ranked first, second, and third in the NFC right now. They've lost twice to the Vikings, twice to the Lions, once to the Eagles. That's their 5 losses. So they're kind of like this clear tier ahead of that middle, like that end of the pack wildcard teams. Like they just proved that over the last month. They kicked everyone's ass.
The Packers are the second tier by themselves.
Yes,
the top 3 teams.
Exactly. And so they're in this weird spot where they've kind of, and in all those games, yeah, it's been close, but they've been clearly outclassed in all those games, whether it was week 1, which even going back to that game, it's like at this point, it doesn't really matter. Those are different teams at this point. The field was weird. But the 2 games against the Lions, they looked outclassed. The 2 games against the Vikings, they looked outclassed. Made them semi-close at the end, but they're in this weird situation where I don't think they can really make noise. Like, I don't think they can be 2 of those teams. Maybe they pull off one wild upset and get one of them, but it's just going to be really hard now going on the road 3 straight weeks for the Green Bay Packers to really unseat any of those top 3 teams in the NFC, in my opinion.
What do you think their biggest issue was? Why are they falling behind so far? I mean, obviously on that first drive, Packers moving, fumble. Second drive, Matt LaFleur is thinking, you know what? We don't want a field goal right now. We want to go for it. We want to get a touchdown this drive. You fail on 4th and 2, and it kind of felt like the game flipped after that because you saw the Vikings go down, get a field goal. It's 10-3. Then they kind of run away with it until the 4th quarter.
Well, I think there's 2 big things. One is their secondary right now. Their secondary is flat out not good enough, especially when you're facing Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. You know, to those 2 receivers today, over 150 yards between them, 377 total to Sam Darnold. It's like they did not win their one-on-one matchups. Where you flip the side, the Vikings won their one-on-one matchups. The entire first half, they played man coverage on 3rd downs, and they basically got off the field on every single one of them. So that's the big difference right now, I think. And the Lions, obviously, their defense, we'll get to them and their woes, as the weeks go on. But the Packers right now, they're just not good enough defensively, and then they just don't have the consistency of execution offensively. They have guys with drop issues. They have fumbled at inconvenient times in those games. And then Jordan Love will just throw it up for grabs here and there. So that, to me, is where they're at. They're just a little too inconsistent offensively and a little too leaky on the back end. That's a recipe for a team that could even be a round 1 exit in a couple weeks here, unfortunately. But the Vikings, when we flip the side, all they have to do next week is they're winning. They're the 1 seed, which who would have guessed that? Even when everything was going well and they traded for Cam Robinson, I was like, man, I don't know if I would have given up draft capital. I don't think this is their year. All of a sudden, this might be their year, John.
It's unbelievable. 'Cause, look, they start 5-0. They go into that, I think, week 6 bye. And then they lost 2 straight games coming out of the bye. And one of our NFL editors is a huge Vikings fan. It felt like every Vikings fan was having a flashback to like 2014 or 2015 when they started out 5-0 and then became the first 5-0 team ever in NFL history to miss the playoffs. And so it almost felt like, oh my God, is that going to happen again? But then you look at those 2 losses they had coming out of that bye. It was the Detroit Lions. It was the Los Angeles Rams, 2 teams that we know are very good right now. So it just wasn't a big deal. And so I think that is the difference. The kind of confidence that Kevin O'Connell has instilled in the team, which, by the way, if I had to vote for Coach of the Year at this point, I think I'm giving 100%. It to O'Connell, because Sam Darnold is his quarterback, and this team could be the number 1 seed in the NFC, which is just the most bizarre thing we've seen since probably Vrabel leading Ryan Tannehill and the Titans to a number 1 seed. And so what he's done with Darnold, and yes, look, you have Jordan Addison, you had Justin Jefferson, as you mentioned. When you have a great receiving core, it makes being quarterback a lot easier, but you still have to make the throws. You still have to avoid the pass rush. You still have to be able to run this offense, and he's running it better than he's playing quarterback at a higher level than almost anyone else right now. And because of that, man, maybe they're a dark horse to get to the Super Bowl, because I didn't really feel like they were a Super Bowl contender until maybe the past couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the 1 seed, you're a Super Bowl contender. You know, I don't. We can make all the excuses we want about how they got here and how maybe they're lucky to get here with only 2 losses, but you end the season with only 2 losses, you're a Super Bowl contender in my book. And I do think the biggest difference in this game is, I got to give a hats off to Quesido Fomensa, Byron Murphy, Stephon Gilmore, 2 guys signed via free agency that were making plays left and right for the Minnesota Vikings on the back end. You know, locking down these vaunted Green Bay Packers wide receivers, while Tom Brady continuously referred to him as Gilly Lock all game to make everyone at home very uncomfortable, in my opinion. But that was like, to get 2 guys who are very lowly paid, middling deals, to play that well in their secondary, to have the secondary that they have, to be able to shut down a Green Bay Packers offense that no one has been able to stop in the past month and a half. You just got to give a hats off to them. When they're playing that well on both sides of the football, yeah, this is a Super Bowl contender in my book.